Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday, and welcome to another edition of Mamas in Miami, where together we're navigating parenthood with unwavering solidarity of one another and fierce love. On today's episode, we're going to be talking to our friend over at Maven and Behavior. That's Alana Guilarte, who you guys know well from our very first chat together. And we're also going to be inviting a new friend, an old friend of Alana's, lifelong friend. Her name is Bianca Pittaluga Escobar, and she's a middle school teacher who's currently on maternity leave. She teaches language arts and journalism, and she's going to be talking to us about all the things that she saw during the pandemic, where our children actually are now struggling as a result of how she navigated her classroom during that time, and then what she did after the fact when she was back in the classroom with what she saw that there was deficits in. I'm also going to include Alana in this conversation because, as you guys know, she's a therapist and she's been out in the field, and I'm sure she's also seeing these things with her patients today. I know I see it with my children. So they are actually together. We're going to invite them in now and we'll start our conversation. Welcome, everybody.
Hey,
Good morning, ladies.
hi.
How are
How are
you?
you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
Good, good. We're excited to chat with you. Yeah, this is a little intimidating. I'm not gonna lie.
Hi, Bianca. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Your puppy is adorable. We were just commenting. Yeah.
Thank you. This is Popcorn. She's kind of become a regular.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, this is a crazy moment for me because I actually babysat these girls together a million years ago. And if that's not proof of my age, then I don't know what is.
No one's counting. No one's keeping track. Don't worry.
And now these two are mamas, and it's what a full circle moment for me. They were actually in my youngest brother's graduating class,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I know them. And so we all know Sprinkle.
Yes, very well.
And Bianca, you have a 14-month-old.
I have a 14-month-old
Who's
Caterina. Delicious. She is, but she counts for three kids because she doesn't stop. She's all day. But I prefer that, like my mom says, you'd rather someone with spice than a papa sin sal, as we say.
I love that. And if she's a little spicy now, just wait until she gets a little older.
I know the hormones. I'm really looking forward to that stage.
So we know Alana very well. If you're joining the show for the very first time, I invite you to go back. She was our very first guest, and we spoke about her company, Maven and Behavior. Why don't you go ahead and refresh everybody for those of us that don't know you, that are meeting you for the first time
Definitely.
today?
So my name's Alana. I am a BCBA, which stands for Board Certified Behavior Analyst. I own my company, Maven and Behavior, and we work with children who have been diagnosed with autism, but also ABA works for anyone and everyone. I've always said you can use it on your dogs, your husband, anyone. So our office is here in South Miami. We've definitely, like Christy said, we did a live together. I encourage you to check it out. And, I think we've done a lot of work in schools as well. I also used to be a special ed teacher. I was a school administrator, so I have a lot of background in that, still working in a lot of schools. So I'm excited for this conversation today because it's definitely, we've seen some impacts from COVID for sure.
Absolutely. And Bianca, you are currently on maternity leave, but you were in the classrooms when the pandemic struck, correct?
Yes, so I actually, funny enough, started at a new school that year. So I got hired July of 2019. And then August, teachers report back, school started. We went on Christmas break, came back, and then March 13th, as I call it, Doomsday,
Mm-hmm.
was the day that the superintendent of schools, Carvalho, made the announcement that we were going virtual to flatten the curve for 2 weeks.
Right.
2 weeks. Ha ha ha. I wish it would have only been 2 weeks. Yeah. And I have to say, and I have to give tremendous props to my administration at the time, which was Kim Guilarte Gill and Luisa Corral. They did a phenomenal job of telling us, ladies and gentlemen, this
is what we need to do because Monday we are going fully virtual. Whatever you need to take home from your classrooms, take it home for the next 2 weeks. I don't know if it was a gut feeling that I had, but I said, let me pack up everything because I don't know if it's really only going to be 2 weeks. And I didn't know when they would let me back into the building. Um, and my now husband at the time basically let me convert his loft into my virtual classroom. So I printed out things, I decorated it, I brought all my resources home, brought my printer home with me in case I had to scan things to upload it to Google Classroom. And that's,
The rest is history.
yeah. I will say there was definitely a long-term benefit from being able to use the technology component more so than before, because we definitely have been able to use technology to our advantage now and better prepare our kids for when, especially mine that are middle schoolers. They were definitely more prepared technologically speaking once they got to high school, because a lot of these kids end up in schools where they have an iPad or a laptop or a tablet. And in my school at the time, each child didn't have one. So this definitely was a good way to kind of kickstart their introduction to needing to use these technological resources.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with both of you because we always talk about being the parent at home, having to virtual learn. We really have never gotten the perspective of teachers on the other side, what it happened to them and what it took for them. I mean, you had the know-with-all to maybe say, you know what, let me take everything home just in case. A lot of people did not have that. And you know, some schools were not prepared technologically. I always say that the pandemic has advanced our society 20 years into the future, because it catapulted our technology and the use of it. I'm in shock. The other day, Adri goes to me, you guys, we're at the 5-year anniversary of COVID, which
That's so sad.
blows my mind to think how far we've come in 5 years. I'm
And so
also,
sad that she's thinking about that. Think about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we're not the only ones. So I'm very excited to hear both of your perspectives. I have so many questions. So
Shoot.
you were prepared. You were ready to go. What was the biggest challenge once, okay, for the first 2 weeks, how did you organize yourself? You set up your loft, and did the school provide you with a schedule for your students, or you had to make it up on your own?
No, so I have to say again, props to our admin. They did a phenomenal job. That weekend, schedules got sent to every teacher, every parent, and every student with logins. The network of schools that I worked for Somerset Academy, South Miami, which is owned by a company called Academica. And what Academica did a phenomenal job was they created their own platform, shall we say, like a Google Classroom, but you could only use it with your certified and registered colegia login, which was fabulous because at the beginning of the pandemic with the teen students, there were some intents to log into the wrong Zoom account and, interrupt a class and disrupt the learning environment. So those were hurdles that obviously it wasn't something that someone could have forecasted. So until we crossed that bridge, we didn't really know how to handle it. But when we got there, we figured it out with our IT people who were also instrumental in making all of this work for us, especially from home, because it wasn't like you could call the IT person to come to your classroom and help you because your smartboard wasn't working. It was, well, I'm in Coconut Grove, someone else is in Kendall, someone's in the Gables, so it wasn't that same accessibility as walking down the hall.
Sure. And did all of your students have access to a device?
Yes, and what a lot of the schools, both public, private, well, not both, private, charter, and public, especially those in areas where they know that they're of lower resources, shall we say, the schools provided the laptops that they had in their school that clearly weren't being used by the students since the students weren't in the building, and they were allowed to come and rent them out essentially. And the teachers sent them home. I know Xfinity at the time was offering free Wi-Fi so that kids could log on from home, and libraries were offering drive-up Wi-Fi so parents could drive their kids up to a library, and you had some kids doing it from their cars. But you know what? The important thing was they were logging on and they were showing up to class. That's what we wanted. That was the goal.
Did you have trouble maintaining their attention, keeping kids on track? Did you run a strict protocol when you would sign into a Zoom? How would you conduct that? And how many students did you have signing in at once?
So the first few weeks, it was a learning process, not only for the kids, but more so for us as the ones who were kind of overseeing. And we were, as the adults, we're looked to be, okay, we follow your lead, but there was no lead for us to know as the adults of what to do. So it was kind of trial and error. I gave the kids 5 minutes. There was a 5 minute window. If they didn't log in within the first 5 minutes of class starting, we had a middle school assistant, Miss Vicky, and she
Sorry.
was kind enough to be the one to contact the parents and the students to say, hey, your child has not logged on. So each middle school teacher would send her an email and she would be logging in and out of all the Zooms. So props to Miss Vicky at the time, or Miss Vicky. And she was the one who would have to reach out to the parents and contact them and say, hey, just to let little Johnny or little Julie wasn't in class today. We need you to help them log on. If there's any technology issues, please let us know so we can help facilitate it.
And at the time, whatever course you were teaching, did you find that you kind of had to say, okay, well, that's it, folks. This is kind of where we end the year and we'll just review, or were you actually teaching new lesson plans
Oh no,
during
I
the
kept
shutdown?
teaching.
You
It
kept
was
teaching.
business as usual. I didn't change anything, content, curriculum wise. What I changed was maybe in the manner that I was having to teach it, because I couldn't do the activities maybe that I had set up for them to do, like decorate something that we're going to do a big project. They did the project, they just did it in a different way. I wasn't able to display it in my classroom how I normally would have on one of a giant post-it sheets on a poster size. They learned how to use Google Slides, they learned how to use Canva, they learned how to use different programs. So that's why I say there's certain aspects of the technology part of the pandemic and distance virtual learning that became a blessing,
Yeah.
and not so much a curse, because it not only taught us new skills, it taught the kids new skills.
Sure.
And it's definitely better prepared them for the long term.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Alana, at that time, I know you were pregnant with Sprinkle, with with Annabelle. Were you out in the field or were you in the classroom?
So interesting. Very similar situation to the schools. I was working as a BCBA at the time for another company, and it was, I think it was like midweek. I forgot what day of the week it was, but it was like we have to shut down. We basically took a week off of work because we're not schools, we're therapies, but our therapies are really crucial to a lot of our families. And our bosses at the time, it's partners, Gomez Behavior Services, who I still love and adore them. And the two owners are some of my closest friends. And they did an amazing job. We took a week off, but we were like, we need to pivot. What do we do? How do we make this work? And we knew the only way was going to be virtual learning. Um, it was challenge. It was a blessing, I think, for me because yes, I was pregnant. My husband didn't want me going out into the world.
Understandably so, in his defense.
Yes,
Right.
very understandably so. So it was a major, major change that we started doing all our services virtually. Once things kind of eased in, I don't remember how far into COVID it was. We started letting the therapists go into the homes if they felt comfortable and the parents were comfortable with it. But we had like a whole protocol going into the homes. Like we came armed with like all the cleaning products, like disinfecting everything before we were coming in and out. It was a whole process. I wasn't going into homes because I'm a supervisor, so I was doing everything remote, but it was a challenge. It was definitely, I hated doing telehealth. I hated virtual visits. I like to be present for our sessions. I think that's one thing in our field specifically that has kind of hurt us because a lot of people have become dependent on remote supervision or remote services and doing assessments remote. And I don't think in our field, you're getting the same results and you're making the same impact if you're doing things virtually. So I try, like at our practice, we don't do anything virtual. We'll do parent trainings via Zoom if we have to, but I always tell the parents, if you can come in, I want to meet with you in person. There's just nothing that's going to replace that in-person visit. Around, I think it was September, like when schools went back in session, everyone kind of went back into the office, but we had a whole protocol of doing things. I actually took significantly less hours because Joel didn't really want me going back into the office.
Well,
'Cause
you
I
were
was,
also way more pregnant at
yeah,
that point.
I was about 6 months pregnant by the time everyone started going back in. And, was it really worth risking not knowing, what was out there, what was happening? So I never went back into the office after that. And then I stayed on maternity leave. as of December. Um, so yeah, I think technology wise, I agree with Bianca. I think there's been huge improvements in technology, but then also what I've seen is too much reliance on technology now, which is a downfall, I think, for all of us. I think even just like one of the things like with medical billing, like there's such a reliance on technology, or even in our practice, there's a lot of companies that will use technology and software to take data collection and things like that. But if it's not working, then they can't take data, they can't do notes, they can't do these things. So we're very old school here, and we do a lot of pen and paper because that never fails you. Um, so I do see those advances, in terms of kids development and what we're seeing in schools. I think Bianca probably sees more. I think we were actually just talking about it before we jumped on. I don't see those changes so much because I think our kids already are kind of at that disadvantage where there are gaps in their learning. There are gaps in certain things. So it's hard to say, okay, is this because of autism? Is this because of some type of delay? Or is this because of COVID?
Sure.
I will say with my own, I mean, my stepson was he was his kindergarten year, COVID year. And the teacher and me came out and we changed our whole entire dining room into a classroom for him. Everything was set up by the time he was ready to go, and we had everything organized.
And he went to one of our schools.
Yeah,
So
he was at Somerset.
was in the situation like I was,
Yeah.
that Friday we contacted the parents, and
Yeah.
Monday he was virtual.
Yeah.
So the parents had what? Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday, and Monday morning at 8 a.m. kids were to report virtually.
Yeah. I mean, he did, but he's an angel. I don't think Sprinkle would do the same. He is an angel.
But every child is also different. Your
Yeah.
personalities are completely.
So he did well, but there was some of our clients that I worked with that it was really, really a struggle to do virtual, and it just wasn't the same. And we really tried and we made it work the best that we could. But it wasn't easy. And I feel bad for Thomas that, his kindergarten year was at home, but he doesn't really talk about it. I think I don't know. What I notice more than anything in schools now, I think there's really an over reliance on technology for a lot of things. What I've noticed more, and I don't know if this is COVID or not, is sometimes too much parent involvement. Like the group chats are just out of control.
Mhm.
I'm like, you're in fifth grade. You don't need someone checking your homework and knowing what every little thing is at every single. I feel like there's not much independence anymore for certain things, and that's what I've seen a big change in. But I don't know if that's a COVID thing or just as I've gotten older.
But maybe that could be a COVID thing, because think about it.
Yeah.
If that was the only means of communication between the school and the students and home, so I will tell you, those group chats, as bad as they can get sometimes, because the original purpose of them, when the teacher's in it, is as a form of communication.
Yeah.
It's a line of communication. However, sometimes the lines get blurred and the chats are not used accordingly. As a teacher, you had the option to remove yourself or keep yourself in.
No.
A lot of times, I would lay down the law, so to speak, in a really nice way and say, hi, parents, please remember that this is a form of communication.
Right.
In the event of an emergency, in order to communicate necessary
You just
things.
shut it down from day one.
I tried to lay it down as simply as possible. However, we were living in unprecedented times.
Yeah.
And with so much uncertainty, that I think maybe I wasn't as, had I been in other moments as a teacher being in a group chat. And even coming back from COVID, once we were back to brick and mortar and everyone was back in school, even though we were still social distancing, the desks had to be X amount of feet apart. Every child had to come in masked. There were little things that we still had to do to help keep each other safe and healthy. And I think the most important thing there was just using that as a means of open communication between home and school.
Yeah.
That was my intention for it.
So the question of the hour for me is, I want other parents to know that they are not in this alone. And I had the greatest blessing of being able to send my kids to school 5 days a week, but that's because we left Miami to do it. They had a completely different curriculum. So I feel like there's a very big gap in each of my kids' learnings. Adriana was also in kindergarten and she was an emerging reader. I feel like her reading to this day is not where it should be. I never like to compare my kids, but I feel like that COVID pause stunted that development for her. And my son was smack in the middle of subtracting and learning his multiplication. Those 7, 8s, and 9s to this day are not strong. They are not. And I talk to people and I realize that my kids are not the only ones that have little gaps in their education. Do you guys see it, especially now, almost 5 years out? Did you guys see it the minute you came back into the classroom and into the field?
So I think for me, I think like I said, with the kids that I work with, it's harder to see, okay, is this COVID or is this something else? But I've noticed with Thomas recently, his writing.
That's what I was
is
about to
not as
ask you.
strong.
If your daughter's writing taken a hit? Because
Big.
okay,
I like Thomas's summer assignment this summer. Joel and I've been talking about it. I was like, this is not what I was doing. I mean, there's a big jump, I think, from fourth to fifth grade.
because remember, that's the year where they have to prep them for middle.
Yeah. So I was like, wait, this is I'm like, you can't turn that in. Like you can't do that.
This is
Like,
unacceptable.
that's not okay. And I don't
It's
know, am I
chicken
expecting
scratch.
it's like
Yeah.
I see such a big jump in what's expected for kindergarten in the early ages, and like I don't see that continuing as they get older. Like yes, we're expecting a lot, but if we're expecting a lot, then why is this work that we're handing in okay? I was really caught off guard. That I was really I told Joel, I'm like, wow, if this is what's happening, I'm really
With
surprised because he's at a Somerset.
with question for you as a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that my son had to have tons of occupational therapy for his hands that were not strong enough, to the point that they told me, that a pencil line would barely be visible on paper because his hands were just not strong.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see more people needing, depending on occupational therapy, because they're using computers more and more, as opposed to coloring and using pencils?
So what's interesting is we have a few kiddos who we are transferring, that we're not really working on fine motor and like writing skills anymore, because ultimately, I think, look at how just our society has changed since we were in kids. We used to learn cursive. They don't teach cursive anymore. I think there's going to be a big push eventually where it's going to eventually be working on a computer and not so much writing. And so for the kids who are really struggling, for our population that we work with, if they're really struggling with writing, we introduce typing, because we know it's something that they're going to be exposed to more often than probably being expected to write something in the future. And we want to make things functional for them so that they can be independent. And if this is going to give them a means of being able to communicate and being able to express the same type of work. For example, we work with a kid who really struggles with writing, but he can spell words, he can type, he can do those things. So
I can have those gaps.
So I can assess him in a different way. Um, does that mean that has to be the case for every kid? No, I still think we should teach writing. I think there's still an importance to it. But I think for certain kids, if we can, we're not going to spend all this time focusing on writing when there's other things that we can be doing and meeting their needs and still challenging them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Bianca, a question for you about the children's social interaction when you came back. I'm noticing when I go visit schools that still allow the telephones out, that they are standing next to each other, but they're like this.
Yep.
They no longer talk to each other.
That was an issue prior to the pandemic. And I can say that with conviction and confidence only because I've only ever taught middle school. I've never taught below 6th grade and I've never taught above 8th. And that is such a fundamental stage. I think the biggest issue there is that was a lifeline during the pandemic. That was their lifeline. That was their tool to still maintain contact, to still feel like they were connected. So to that point, the phone saved these kids, because what you were seeing shortly after the pandemic, with maybe kids whose parents were a little bit more strict with their rules of allowing the kids to go back into the classroom or starting to socialize the kids more in a personal setting, was that that was their means to keep in contact with one another.
Right.
And then you have kids whose parents were a little stricter. So for those kids whose parents were strict, this made them feel like they were still a part of that community that they belonged to. So this saved a lot of kids. I will tell you, as a teacher, I hosted virtual lunches because you would hear the kids say, I don't have anyone to talk to during lunch. My mom's working, my dad's working, my siblings are in school at the same time, so our schedules don't line up, which is 100% understandable at the time. So I said, you know what? So once a week, I would tell the kids the week before, pick the date next week, and you have virtual lunch with Miss Pita. And we would do that. I remember the first time I was on there with kids for 2.5 hours.
Aww.
And they were like, Miss Pita, when we go back into the classroom, can we do this in your room? And then I felt so bad because I couldn't answer that definitively at the time. I didn't know when, I didn't know how. And, we found our ways. I mean, we had to have the kids sitting outside, socially distanced. Like, there were so many things and restrictions, but we made it work. And we did it to the best of our ability. I mean, our hands literally were tied. But we did it and we made it work. I would say for me, the more concerning thing during the pandemic wasn't so much the learning holes, it was more the social, emotional, and psychological effects that the pandemic was having on middle schoolers in particular, because that age is so heavily dependent on the socialization with the friends. It's so heavily dependent on the need to feel like you belong, that you're a part of something. And thankfully, the group of kids I had that year were so incredibly mature and wise beyond their years from their social standpoint that they didn't worry me. But there were classes younger than them that you just see such a difference between like a sixth grader and an eighth grader that I was like, man, these poor kids.
And what do you
And
see now? Do you see that those kids have a little bit of a lag?
I don't think so. I think they've fixed that lag. I think the holes of the social, psychological, and emotional side of it, that I've seen, that gap has closed tremendously, if not completely. Where I see more the hole is in the learning gaps. And that's not a dig at the teachers at all, because I was one who went through it. I think we all did the best that we could, both at home as far as the support from the parents, because the teachers, we couldn't have done what we did without the parents holding the kids accountable, making sure they were logging in, making sure they were completing their assignments. If they weren't able to submit it, getting the help they needed in order to do so. It was a team effort between the kids, the parents, and the schools. But I do see now, I work with a student privately who now you're seeing her issues in reading comprehension, because it's not so black and white the reading. Now you're making inferences. So it's not something that's literally stated in the text. The child now has to decide for that on their own.
And
that
how
is
old was she when the pandemic hit?
Was in kindergarten.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah. So I will say, I know that there are parents who felt that their child didn't, maybe, and I think it was more those who had older kids and had seen what a real, shall we say, kindergarten year was.
Right.
And I think everyone did the best that they could and to the best of their abilities, given the difficult times and the situation we were in. But I think the parents who were more proactive, shall we say, and maybe got their kids extra help, whether it was virtual tutoring or when we were back in person, they're like, look, I'm noticing some holes. Can you give me extra support and extra resources to help my child?
Sure.
Because I can tell you that the summer of 2021, I was working with kids for multiple hours a day in the South Miami library, working with those kids to help make sure that whatever holes mom, dad, teacher, and child felt, we were closing those gaps to allow for them to not only get to where they needed to, but to have the foundation that they needed to be equipped well and set up well for the future. Because school doesn't get easier as you get older.
No.
School only gets harder. And I always use the analogy. It's like when you're building a house. If the foundation isn't good, you cannot expect for everything that you're about to put on top of that foundation
Of course.
to be solid to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my biggest thing. And I would tell the kids, if there was anything we learned at this point, we're at this point in the year, if there's anything that we have covered that you don't feel that you have mastered or you want extra help in, tell me. I would provide my students with extra resources. If, sometimes it's a little embarrassing to raise your hand in the middle of a Zoom with your peers and say, hey, I didn't really get this.
Especially at that age.
Because it's very intimidating.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So what I would do is I would tell them, email me, send me a private message on Zoom that no one can see it, only I could see it. And then there we would go from there.
So I've been saying for the longest time that I have always felt that what you and I know as to be kindergarten is now first grade. What I knew first grade to be is second grade. Do you feel like we're kind of pulling that back in again as a whole community?
No.
Or are we just trying to catch the kids up and get them out the door?
Yeah.
That's how
I don't know if it's the concept of getting them out the door. I think it's that kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. I don't know if you agree with that part.
I do.
I also think that because this generation of kids has access to information much more easily than we did.
Yeah.
right.
I think that's why the expectations and the rigor can be a little ahead.
Yeah.
How you're saying that you feel that what was once first grade curriculum is now kinder, and what was once second is now first. I think that is only designed in a way because research has proven, data has proven, whether it's through iReady diagnostics, if it's through IXL diagnostics, if it's now through the FAST, if you're in a archdiocesan school, you use Terra Nova, if you're in an independent school, you use Iowa. All of these assessments that are used, the data is proving that this can now be given to a child of a certain age. Does that mean that every child is going to master every single skill? No. And that's okay because everyone learns in a different way and everyone learns at a different pace. As teachers, our job is to find the way that is most effective to teach each of our learners and teach it to them and present it to them in the way that they are best going to not only learn it, but also retain it. Because it's very easy to learn something. I can learn something, memorize something, spit it out, write it on a test, submit the test, and get an A. But does that mean that in 3 weeks, I'm going to remember what that teacher taught me? If I didn't understand it,
No.
I won't.
Of course. Of course. So in today's world, I'm seeing a very big push to get technology, like phones specifically, out of the classrooms. I know that our alma mater is doing that at their high school this year. And I actually received a petition request from one of the class of 2024 to integrate the phone back onto campus. And I almost thought, like, if I didn't have one, you're not going to have one, and you're going to be perfectly fine. And I was the 9/11 graduating class. Like, people really wanted a cell phone just to know that they were marked safe. Do you see that as a benefit right now, or a deficit in terms of their social emotional learning? Like, do you think that they're going to be able to put the phone down and know how to have a conversation?
No. I'm very, I mean, so I was very anti-technology devices, I think up until COVID. Thomas didn't even have a tablet at our house until COVID. And then it was like, crap, like he's so bored. Like he just wants to play some games. Like, okay, so we gave in. Thomas actually, we got him a phone for Christmas this year. And I will say there's been such a huge change. I mean, he goes between two houses, so it's nice to be able to have that communication.
And it's directly with him.
Yeah,
It's
and
not having to go through someone else.
so that's nice. But we have to do a lot of like regulating it and then monitoring it and being on top of it, and it's still hard. I got a phone around his age too, but it's like Joel and I were talking about, when I had a phone, it was black and white. You could only play Snake, and you didn't have
And make
access.
calls. That was it.
Like you didn't have access to all of these things. And there's times where he's sitting there and like he's on a Switch and he's like scrolling through things on the phone, and it's like it's all over the place. And I think it's hard at that age. I mean, I remember around that age, our method of communicating with our friends was like calling them on the phone. We didn't have computers, we didn't have text. It was so different, and I'm pro not having phones in school. I'm for it, but I'm a little old school.
I will tell you, as someone who is no longer in the classroom brick and mortar, and I help a lot of students, a phone can be helpful, especially when a kid isn't in school that day. They missed a class because they left early for sports. They arrived late because they had a dentist appointment. So a phone becomes a resource and a tool versus impeding the instructional and learning environment. My whole thing is
If
I'm
it's used
all for
correctly.
it if it's used correctly.
Well, like Thomas for his summer reading assignment that he had to do, Joel and I are going through the answers, and I'm like, hold on a second. I'm like, this doesn't. I'm like, these responses don't even make sense. I Google one of the questions from the thing, and the response was right there in front of me, what he had written on the paper. I'm like, you didn't.
Plagiarize.
Yeah, I'm like, you didn't even do a good job at copying it and like somewhat changing it. Like, and
No, he did an excellent job at copying it. He copied and he pasted it. He did excellent at that.
So I think there it's like Bianca says, like using it correctly and using it, this isn't just to like cheat. This isn't just to like BS with your friends. Like I don't know, but it's a slippery slope. And then two, I think, what are we modeling for our kids? I'm on my phone all the time. Am I modeling, the best behavior? Probably not. So why is it okay for me to do it and not for him to do it? That's always my argument on something like that.
Do you feel that way more so with Thomas than you do with Sprinkle? I'm asking because of
Sprinkle
what I'm noticing with Katerina.
is never allowed to use my phone. If she gets access to a tablet, it's limited to 10 minutes at the very end of the day. And I wish I would have never shown her a tablet, to be honest. There's days where I'm like, I wish she didn't even know that this existed. But it's like the biggest reinforcer. I think we're different with Thomas just because it's different like uses. Because he's on a phone and like it's different. I don't know,
Yeah,
but
he's also older. He's at a different stage too. No, I asked because Katerina obviously sees my husband and I and my parents and my in-laws
Yeah.
and my sister, like just everyone.
Always
We're
on a phone.
prisoners to these things.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible,
Oh.
but it's true. Our entire lives are on them.
Yeah. Annabelle tells me to get off the phone. She's like, Mama, put your phone down. Get off your phone. Your phone's done. Things
Well,
like
that's
that.
Do that
because
too.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm almost embarrassed when
Yes.
they tell me.
Yes.
And I'll tell them I'm working. I'm either doing something for dad or and they're like, but you don't work. I'm like, I'm sorry. But yes, like I'm answering a teacher's email or I'm scheduling a doctor's like this is what we live off of now, unfortunately. This is how we run our day. This is my calendar. This is my schedule. This is
Your lifeline.
My lifeline.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the word.
Yeah. So my whole thing is I'm worried because Katerina sees all of us on our phones and I see that sometimes she'll just grab it. Like yesterday it was I find it funny because she's my kid, but maybe someone else is like, wow, those parents really give this kid a lot of freedom. Katerina sees a phone somewhere in the house. She picks it up and she grabs it and she walks around like this. The phone is completely backwards. The screen is on the outside.
She knows what to
but
do.
She knows what to do with it. So it's terrifying that at 14 months.
Yeah, she knows.
She knows.
Well, I saw a video of Sprinkle the other day and she pulled out like a board game and she made it look like a computer and she said she was having a meeting.
Yes, because every day we get home, my husband still works from home. A positive aspect of COVID, I guess. And whenever we get home, he's usually in a meeting in the afternoon. So I'm like, you have to be quiet. Like, Papa's in a meeting, and she's like, I'm in a meeting. You need to leave. Go away. I'm like, this is what we sound like. It's horrible.
Now, with that said, what an imagination that she took a board game into she turned it into a laptop.
She's creative. I'll give her that.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time today, but I just want to ask, what lasting effects do you think the pandemic will play in today's education of our kids?
Oh,
Other than fast forwarding our technology 1,000,000%.
Not so much on education. I think the effect that COVID really had on everyone, I think we shut down and I think we kind of saw, okay, we don't have to be 100% reliant on work. Not that we're reliant on work, but there was a lot more grace given to people in the workplace. And I think we're kind of, we're out of COVID and there's not that much grace anymore. I think people also feel like, oh, well, we shut down. I didn't have to be in the office. You don't need me physically there. And it's kind of that type of, I think there's been a shift in attitude just overall. I think work ethic has really changed overall. I think entitlement has changed a lot overall. And I think that trickles down into kind of what we instill in our kids and what we instill in classrooms. I mean, I think there's been a huge shift in teaching. There's a huge teacher shortage.
But I also, sorry, just to piggyback off of that, I think part of the teacher shortage is teachers were such a crucial part in everything during the pandemic. I'm saying aside from teaching kids.
Oh, yeah.
And when teachers were supposed to be made to feel like they were most appreciated,
They weren't.
they weren't.
Yeah.
So what desire does that give you in a profession that does not compensate how it should?
Yeah.
What desire does that give you to want to keep coming back?
I think that's the effect that you're seeing right now. Especially in Miami-Dade public schools, there's a huge shortage. We have a kid in a class who it's supposed to be just a very small classroom setting, and they don't have a teacher, so they've merged classes, and it's a huge class now, and it's at the expense of our kids and their education. And I know someone in the district that said, as long as it has a pulse, hire them. There's really I mean, it's scary some of the things that we see in classrooms, especially in Miami-Dade public schools, just because they are cutting corners and trying to make ends meet.
But that's it right there. It's not for lack of wanting to do what's right. It's a matter of, it's almost like they're in a survival mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what it is. It's not for lack of not wanting to provide the resources and what the kids need, or wanting to provide to the teachers what they need. Their hands are tied.
Yeah.
They have to do the best within the
What
parameters that are set with what they have. Exactly.
I always say that the teachers are our most underappreciated
Yes.
industry in the world. Teaching is a vocation. Let's start there.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be inside a classroom if that's not what you are
Yes.
burning to do. It's like you have to want to do it, you know? Yeah. And I guess also in today's day and world where technology has advanced so much, that older generation has kind of been forced into retirement because they don't even know how to work the computers or the whiteboard. They're still old school with the chalk and the chalkboard and you know, the cursive and the handwriting and the pencil grips, and it's
even just like the support of children. I actually this morning got off a call with a mom that she can't even take her child to school right now because they want certain support in place for him to be able to go there. And the teacher said, I've been a kindergarten teacher for 15 years, but I can't deal with your child. And it's like I told her, just because you've been a kindergarten teacher for 15 years, that doesn't mean you have experience with special ed. And it's a totally different ballgame. But unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of that. And, you know, I think the teaching used to be, you know, one method, you know, one size fits all type of thing. And we've learned that that is not the case. And I think that it's a struggle.
But I think that's a good thing that has become a little bit more adaptive. It's not just about the majority. It's about making sure that every single child's needs are met.
Yeah.
Despite if that is the majority of the kids in the classroom.
Yeah.
Because something you just touched upon, Christy, and you as well, Alana, about, you know, the technology aspect of it and how, you know, the older generation of teachers were kind of forced out of the field. Mm-hmm. My dad did the opposite. My dad started teaching at Columbus virtually in the middle of a pandemic. So it's like, you know, for a 60-year-old guy who went to Columbus himself in the 70s, he was like, well, the kids are the same. They're just like us. The problem is my dad couldn't keep up with the technology. So there were days where when I would finish with my class, I would have to help my dad with his because he was like, Zoom, what is this? Bianca, help me with this, help me with that. And I was happy to do it. But you also have to give props to people like my dad who put themselves in very vulnerable situations, so to speak, because that was completely unknown to them. And those older ones who said, you know what, I don't know this, but I'm going to do my best and I'm going to try to learn it.
Yeah.
And they did that. And kudos to them because it's way easier to quit than to try to learn and do something new.
And nobody commends them for doing that.
Yeah.
There's no appreciation there. And those are the people that need to be highlighted. Because honestly, teachers, the way that they handled those shutdowns, no matter what you think of the outcome of what your child went through, you got to put yourself in the teacher situation. Yeah. They were not prepared for this. They were not expecting this. This is the first time many of them had to figure things out technologically. I mean, I don't think I had ever even heard of Zoom before. I think there was Skype, but like Zoom was completely new to me too when the pandemic happened. So, you know, I don't think we give teachers fair kudos for what happened. Yeah.
I will say, well, Teacher Appreciation Week that year was extra special. Extra special, which was very much appreciated from both parents.
Be every year. It should be.
But I think especially when everyone's going through a moment like that, I think that, at least for me, it made me feel like, okay, the late nights, are
So
worth
worth
it.
it.
I mean, I did an entire virtual graduation. I produced and directed
You're
with
amazing.
help of some people in other schools of ours. I mean, my principal's daughter was graduating, my assistant principal's son was graduating. We had a lot of kids like of our own that I was like, no, they're getting a graduation.
Aw.
And we did it virtually. We did it all through Zoom. Hell or
Very
high water came
cool.
and we made it happen for these kids because those kids deserve to be honored and recognized the same way every class before them and every class after them. And we did it for kinder that year and we did it for 8th grade.
That's
So
amazing. That's so
where there's a will, there's a way.
absolutely. Well, I hope both of you will come back again. We just barely touched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so many new conversations I want to have with you just based on our conversation today. So I hope you guys will both be back.
Of
and
course.
Thank you guys
Whenever you want.
sharing knowledge with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Great talking to you all. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.